السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قال الله تعالى في شان حبيبي إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Today is the 16th of Rabiul Awwal. We started talking last week about the events around the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in reality, the birth announcement of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we talked a lot last week about announcements that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made for previous prophets, such as Isa alayhi salam, Yahya alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, and Ibrahim alayhi salam. In reality, he made announcements for every prophet. He mentioned some of those in the Quran, but when he sends, and this is when you have someone that you love and you send them for a purpose, then you want everybody else to love them. And the distinction of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam above all of the rest of creation is that he is Habibullah. One time the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam were sitting in the masjid, and they were discussing amongst themselves, that Ibrahim Khalilullah, Ibrahim alayhi salam, the friend of Allah, Musa Kalimullah, Musa alayhi salam is the one who spoke to Allah, Ismail Zabiullah, Ismail alayhi salam is the one who was sacrificed for Allah, Isa Ruhullah, Isa the soul of Allah. Of course, Allah is free from soul and body, but this is metaphorical, an expression of love. And as they're discussing this, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes and they say, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we're talking about this. What is your distinction? Because for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all of these other distinctions for the other prophets, for him were common. If you look at the distinctions of all of the other prophets, they attained those distinctions because of him. For Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this was common. So they asked him, they said, what is your distinction? And he said, Habibullah, the beloved of Allah. So when you have the beloved, Allah loves them all, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then you know that the announcements are going to be very different. And again, as we mentioned last week, all of the other prophets, the announcements were local because they were local prophets. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is universal, not just global, not just within this system, but he is universal. Everywhere, every time, all space, all time, even no space, and no time. Every realm, everything. He is the prophet to everyone, to everything that exists in creation. And so the announcements for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam are also universal. First off, all of Kufr is made aware he's here. Get ready for your decline. So as we mentioned last week, even before his birth, 55 days before the birth, Abraha comes to destroy the Kaaba. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defends the Kaaba, not as the Lord of the Kaaba, but as the Lord of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka. Did you not see what your Lord sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Oh my beloved, did you not see what your Lord did to the people of the elephant? This is why he defended the Kaaba, because of the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When his mother is expecting him, she never gained any weight. Nabi's nur has no weight. She herself, she says, she never experienced any difficulty. Not even at the time that he's being born. No difficulty at all. Because he is rahmatul lil alameen. He is a mercy to all of creation, then how can he be a burden to his mother? She herself says that when he was born, it was that light issued forth from her through which she could see the palaces of Sham. The Byzantine Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, which ruled, which had shifted its capital to Syria. She said she could see those palaces. The thing is, if you're sitting in Mecca, and even if you have a very powerful telescope, you still can't see Sham. We've talked about this before. As far as seeing something on eye level, at 35 miles I can't see it, even if it's a clear path, because of the curvature of the earth. Here you have all of these mountains in between as well. And yet she can see it. Because of the nur of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, penetrating everything. The fire in Persia that had been lit for 1,000 years suddenly goes out for no reason. At least no apparent reason for them. It's gone. This is a fire they were attending non-stop. It's gone. Again, the announcements are coming that he is here now. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The throne of the Persian Emperor Kisra shook. 14 of his balconies fell. And we spoke about this last week. If you count from the time of the birth of Rasulullah to the end of the Kisra era, there were 14. During the time of the beginning of the Khilafah of Uthman Radwan was the last Kisra. That was it. And again, if you count from the time of the birth of Rasulullah to that time, there are only 14. This is the announcement. Get ready. The lake of SAWW, which was in Iraq, and this lake was so huge you had major ships in it. It is also like the headquarters for a lot of indecency. These days you got certain nude beaches and stuff, Yes. All these indecencies going on. Suddenly goes dry. The jinn before this time were able to go into the heavens or into the skies and listen to the angels speak. And they would relay that message down, adding lie after lie to it. And then they also had the power to go and sit inside of the idols and speak. And at the birth of Rasulullah ﷺ, all of that stops. This is why when you read Surah Jinn, if you read the tafsir of Surah Jinn, you have 6 jinn from Iraq who have been roaming the world trying to find out what happened so that they could no longer do these things. And as Rasulullah ﷺ is returning from Taif to Makkah, this is when they hear him reciting the Quran and they realize this is what has happened. This is the one who has come. Again, at the birth of Rasulullah is when this happens. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decorates, Jannah is already decorated. When people talk about Jannah, they like to talk about the hadith of Rasulullah where he said that Jannah, within Jannah are things that no eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard of, no mind has ever even imagined. I've seen people use this hadith to argue certain points, but the point that I'm going to make here, which disputes their points, is that Rasulullah is khayr khalqillah. He is the best of the creation of Allah. And there's nothing even close to him. Jannah is a creation of Allah. So even though Jannah may have all of these things, the earth has already seen the one who is better than Jannah, has already seen the one whose presence in reality is Jannah. When you go to Medina Munawwara, everybody wants to make salat in Riyadul Jannah. This is a spot right next to the house of Rasulullah in the masjid. What does Riyadul Jannah mean? Garden of Jannah. Why is it the Garden of Jannah? Because it's next to Rasulullah. Its presence to Rasulullah makes it the Garden of Jannah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders. Now in Jannah, nothing becomes old. Nothing becomes dirty. But He orders the inhabitants of Jannah, the Hur, the Ghilman, all of these inhabitants. And one point here also to make. A lot of people will tell you, the only way to Jannah is through good deeds. What good deeds did the Hur and the Ghilman do to attain their position in Jannah? The only way to Jannah is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And who is the mercy of Allah other than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Again, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. That we have not sent you except as a mercy to all of creation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He orders on the day of the birth of Rasulullah, He orders all of the inhabitants of Jannah to put on new clothes, even though the old clothes, which weren't really old, they're still new, because again, nothing becomes old in Jannah. But He says, no, we're going to make a distinction here. Something is different. Again, an announcement, a universal announcement of the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So even the inhabitants of Jannah are celebrating this coming. This gets back to the command of Allah in Surah Yunus in the Quran, where He says, قُلْ بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَبِرَحْمَتِهِ فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِّمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. So He's saying to Rasulullah, O my beloved, قُلْ, say to them, in the favor of Allah and in His mercy, rejoice. So when the favor of Allah comes, but if He simply said, when the favor of Allah comes, rejoice. He specifies the favor and, because it's a wa. The conjunction here is and, it's not or. So it's when His favor and His mercy comes, then rejoice. Everything everything from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is His favor. But who is His greatest favor? لَقَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ بَعَثَ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا. Rasulullah ﷺ is the greatest favor of Allah. لَقَدْ Man is that favor that can't be repaid. Man also indicates the favors that come from above. Like in the Quran, Manu Salwa. The people of Musa alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Manu Salwa for them. Man there means it coming from above. But again, man, you can't repay it. In reality, we can't repay any favor of Allah. Even to say, oh, we can't repay a drop of water Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave, that drop, that even is too much. We can't repay anything. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling it out. He doesn't call out any other favors. This is the only favor He calls out. And He specifies here to the believers that Allah has bestowed this great favor upon the believers, that He sent this exalted messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not just any messenger, it's an exalted messenger, Rasulan. So He is the favor, and He is the mercy. And then in Surah Wadduha, وَبِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ, the last verse of Surah Wadduha. فَبِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ, that when you are given the favor, then narrate it, proclaim it. Proclaiming it doesn't mean, I'm not going to say anything. It means you say something, you talk about it. And the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, again, is that favor that overshadows all other favors. Like when the sun is out, you can't see the stars. So in front of the favor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all the other favors, they are favors, and we can't repay them. But there is no comparison here. When we, in all of these announcements, again, over and over, many rivers that were dry started to flow. Rabi in Arabic means spring. Rabiul Awwal, the first spring. It's interesting when you look at the various months, in the Islamic calendar, the lunar calendar. If you look historically before the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, every month had some significance in connection to something, with the exception of Rabiul Awwal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had preserved this month for the coming of His Habib, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the other interesting aspect of that is that Rabi, in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is born, wasn't simply spring in the northern hemisphere. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it spring everywhere that month, which in itself becomes a miracle. That even the southern hemisphere, everything is reborn. This is what spring does, Everything's been dormant, and spring comes and it's a rebirth. Everything now becomes alive. Those trees that you looked at, they look dead, and now suddenly they're green. This is what the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam does. His coming is life. It's interesting, if you read Surah Kahf, and we should read Surah Kahf every Friday, but if you read Surah Kahf, you have in Surah Kahf the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khizr alayhi salam. Quick synopsis of the story. Musa alayhi salam asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is there anyone who has more knowledge than me? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says yes. And then he says, well, I want to meet him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him to go a certain place. And so Musa alayhi salam going with his companion, Yusha alayhi salam. They're walking, you know. They take some breaks, they keep walking, they don't find anybody. Musa alayhi salam finally, he gets tired. He sits down and he tells Yusha alayhi salam, he says, look, I'm tired, you know, I'm hungry, bring the fish that we brought to eat. So Yusha alayhi salam, he says to him, he says, oh, Shaitan made me forget. When we stopped at the last stop and we were resting, the fish jumped out of the basket into the water and swam away. This is a cooked fish, and it's not like the Chinese cooked fish. Okay, this is an actual cooked fish, you know, dead and cooked. And Yusha alayhi salam, oh, it swam away. And Musa alayhi salam says that was the sign. That is where we were supposed to meet him. So they backtrack and come running back. And this is where they find Khizr alayhi salam. You know. And the interesting thing, which is not mentioned in the Quran, is Khizr alayhi salam is laying there with the sheet over his head. Musa alayhi salam comes to him from the head side, gives him salam, and Khizr alayhi salam responds, Wa alaikum as-salam ya Musa. How did he see Musa? But simply taking this aspect, I'm not going to go into the whole story, because that's not the point here. Why was that the sign? This dead, cooked fish becomes alive, and not only alive, jumps into the water and swims away. Khizr al-Islam, according to, well, there's a dispute whether he is a prophet or not. According to the Sufiya, he is a prophet. We accept him as a prophet. But irregardless whether he is a prophet or not, his status is not greater than the status of Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam is not just Nabi, he is a Rasul, and not just any Rasul, he is Ulul Azam Rasul. He is the 5 exalted messengers. He's amongst them. The point Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making is, even these people give life because of their connection to the ones that Allah loves. Because they are also, by becoming connected to the ones that Allah loves, they themselves become the ones Allah loves. And again, if you look at all the prophets, it's their connection to Rasulullah that gives them their position. And I'm not going to go into the details of that either right now, because time's getting short. But again, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing this point. Musa alayhi salam is Musa, but even Khizr alayhi salam, his presence gives life. And everything that all of them were given, they were given because of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who in reality himself is life. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had not created him, he would not have created anything else. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the purpose of creation. Hadith al-Qudsi, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I was a hidden treasure and love to be known, so I created al-Khalq. So that tells us many things, but it also tells us that whatever this creation or whoever this creation is going to be will know Allah because Allah created him to be known. And he will be the beloved of Allah because Allah created him out of love. The only one who fits that description is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is Habibullah and he is the greatest knower of Allah. It is because of him that we know Allah. If Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had not told us who Allah is, how would we know Allah? Everybody would have their own understanding of Allah. You know, you put two people together and you get three different opinions. So rejoicing and talking and narrating the coming of Rasulullah. So, I mean, it's, the interesting thing is when you look at these narrations that are connected to the birth of Rasulullah, and so many other narrations, everybody knows that, you know, when he's born, then, you know, of course, the custom of the Quraysh is to send the children out to be nursed, and so that they keep the pure language, and it'd be healthy for them. Everybody also knows when all these women from the outlying tribes came, they all overlooked him because he was an orphan. The last one to arrive was Bibi Halima from Banu Sa'd radiallahu anha. The only child that's left is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She arrived last. Why? Because her animals were the slowest. Where they were coming from, there was drought. So the animals had nothing to eat, or didn't have much to eat. But when she accepts him, when she takes him, you know, after her husband, Harith, he tells her, he says, you know, we should take him. Her animals are now the fastest. And when Rasulullah sits on the donkey, it becomes the fastest. When he arrives there, the goats and the sheep, now their udders are full with milk. Wherever their sheep go to graze, everything becomes green. So now everybody else says, oh, wherever their animals are going, our animals are going. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making all of these announcements. You know, it's funny, some people, they say, oh, you know, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't know that he was a messenger until he was 40. You know, you read the hadith, you know, one is, even if there was no hadith, that goes against everything in the Quran as well. But the hadith is also very clear in Sahih Muslim and Bukhari, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, I recognize the stones and the shrubs that gave me salam before my declaration of prophethood. What were these stones and these trees saying? They're saying, Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's no narration of him saying, oh, did you hear something? You know, if I hear something coming from an inanimate object, and I'm with somebody else, what am I going to do? I'm going to ask him, did you hear that? Am I going crazy? No. You know, these people, they'll accept that hadith superficially, and oh, so the trees and the stones knew who he was, but he didn't know who he was. What type of sense does that make? Knowing him is to love him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if we don't love him, then we don't know him. The problem, though, is, you know, we say this, but unfortunately, most of us not just don't know him, we don't even know what love is. In this superficial, narcissistic world, you know, we have forgotten what love is. There's a poetry of Rumi, which many people think that it's just the poetry of Rumi. It's actually a translation of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He simply put it in poetic words in Farsi. The hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that love, true love, makes one blind and deaf. So that the true lover, he does not see any shortcomings in his beloved, nor is he willing to hear anything against his beloved. So that when someone, he says, oh, you know, Rasulullah was all of these great things, but he didn't know this, or he didn't have authority over this, or he couldn't do this. He didn't know what was on the other side of the wall. All of these other things that these people say, if we truly love him, that should really make our blood boil. And if it doesn't, then we need to question our love, even our understanding of love. I'll end here today. Inshallah, next week, the intention is, and you know, I don't usually do this, but I'll go ahead and say, we'll talk about the last verse of Surah Kahf next week. قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ يُوحَى إِلَيَّ أَنَّمَا إِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ. Because this is a very abused and misused verse. So inshallah next week we will talk about that specifically. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill our hearts with his true love and the true love of his beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom they love. And may he protect our brothers and sisters in Gaza and wherever people are being oppressed over their oppressors. So those who have not made sunnah, go and make sunnah, inshallah.